Welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. Hosted by the editors of Writer's Digest, this monthly podcast features conversations with writing and publishing experts whose insights will help ignite your creative vision, hone your skills, build your platform, and get your work out into the world. Welcome back to Writer's Digest Presents. I'm Editor-in-Chief Amy Jones alongside Senior Editor Robert Lee Brewer, Managing Editor Mariah Richard, and Editor Michael Woodson. At the end of July, the staff of Writer's Digest will be heading to New York City for the Writer's Digest Annual Conference. It's the first time we'll be back with the WD writing community since before the pandemic. And this got us thinking about writing communities in general, our experience with them, what's great about them, what can go wrong potentially. So that's what today's episode is all about. Mariah and Michael will bring you two conversations with organizers of two different writing communities. But first we'll have a chat among the editors of Writer's Digest. Hey everyone.
Hello.
So sort of like what we do with the other topics that we've talked about, I sort of want to start a little bit broad and talk about the idea that writing communities can take different formats. They can be in person or they can be online only. So what do you think of when you think of a writing community?
For me, I think of both actually. Online, I've built up some communities around a few different topics. Poetry in April is maybe like the one that's like the really big one. But I've also done like platform challenges before, and something about doing challenges seems to inherently like produce communities around it because of all the people who are participating, want to encourage each other, share tips with each other, and they tend to like start off doing the challenge in one place and then reconnecting on another social platform like Facebook or Instagram or something like that. Mainly Facebook though, because I think that's the place where you can really like share like a little bit more in-depth stuff, information. But I've also had experience with in-person writing communities, some of them more formal and some a little less formal, and the less formal ones being usually smaller groups of writers getting together. The more formal ones, I think of like the state poetry societies. There's like a whole federation of them that put on different events. But there are other writing genres that have these types of groups as well.
Yeah, I think that for me, a writing community is really just a group of people who have the same kind of interests when it comes to writing. So I know you guys are probably really enthusiastic to hear me talk about fan fiction some more. But again, like fan fiction is like something that's mostly alive online, but not necessarily the people who write fan fiction are interested in writing original content, where the in-person groups that I'm a part of, like I'm a member of the Maryland Writers Association, and a lot of people there, their goal is to write and publish original content. So no matter how the group is formed, where it lives, like on the internet or in person, I think it really just all comes down to the goals of that group and the interests of the people who are a part of that community.
That's really interesting because my experience with it has been, well, I think before this working at WD, I would have answered that more specifically with being the concept of like an in-group writing group that's literally meeting to discuss what we're writing. But this job and WD has shown me that is very limiting, and that there's a huge active community happening online across platforms and genres, as we've said. In my experience with my writing group, I'm in a writing group and it's very casual. It was just three of my best friends and myself after one of our book club chats. We're like, we all ask each other about our writings independently. Let's just get together and start a writing group. And part of what I loved about it was how different all of what we were doing how different all of our stuff was and what we were bringing to the table, because that really informed my writing and what I like about what I write and what I need to work on in my writing. Like one of us was writing a script, another one of us was writing something very political, and then I just write like very sad stuff all the time. And they were like, you need to cheer up. And so for me, I think it's just people who ultimately have your best interest in mind and want to help you tell the best possible story you can.
I love that. I love that idea of it. I think mine sort of kind of meshes together some of what all of you were saying. You know, I think of like a writing community broadly as, you know, I guess using Writer's Digest as the example, you know, we have the website and the annual conference, which is sort of like the large overarching community that sort of functions as like inspiration and support and general advice. But then when you really want to like focus on something specific, you can build a writing community, or writing communities are built around specific shared common goals and ideas, sort of like what Mariah was saying with fan fiction, where it's focused in on a particular thing, and whether that's genre or, you know, wanting to get published or a specific type of fan fiction. But Michael, I'm interested in what you were saying about your experience with writing communities, and I want to know more about the writing communities that that all of you are in, and have they been generally good or bad, or somewhere in between, or is there some way to make them work better for you that you have experienced?
Yeah, my writing group is, like I said, just a collection of my friends who we all realized we love to write and started a writing group and we were, but pre-COVID, meeting monthly in person, sharing our work. And then COVID times, we kind of moved it to like once a quarter, which ultimately was working better for us because we were meeting we didn't have enough new stuff to show each other, to really get much feedback on. And I think it's because it's made up of people that I know, who I know are going to respect my boundaries, that I love this writing group. And it's only been good for me. And they lovingly push me to just get out of my comfort zone with even sharing my stuff, because that is really hard for me. And I mean, I'm in my 30s and I've been writing for years, and I've rarely tried to get my stuff published because I'm just afraid of anyone reading it. And they're sort of helping me get out of that fear very slowly. But for me, it's been just only good for me has come out of it.
Yeah, I guess it would depend. For like, I've been a part of many groups over the years. I've moved around a lot, which has contributed to that. But I think it just really depends on like where the group is at any point in time. So for example, I was a part of a group separate. So we were all kind of in the MFA program together, but it was separate from the work that we were doing for our degree. And it was really great in the few years that we were all in the same city. But then, you know, as time went on and we all had, you know, different things happening in our personal lives, in our professional lives, it kind of got to the point where I was doing all of the reviewing, all of the reading, and then my stuff was kind of getting pushed to the side. So I just had to make a decision that, like, love you guys, but I'm not going to be participating in this group anymore because it's starting to feel a little unbalanced here in terms of workload. So it's not necessarily that the writing groups I've been a part of have been, like, quote unquote bad experiences. I think that it's just really healthy to you know, be in touch with your own boundaries, as Michael was saying. Like, this is what I need from this group. If I'm getting it currently, great. I'd love to be a part of this community. If it's no longer serving me in the way that I need, I think it's really healthy and to just kind of exit that community, and it doesn't have to be drama filled, it doesn't have to be painful. It can just be like, love you, not anymore, I'm not going to be a part of this group.
Yeah, I love that thought, Mariah. That's been my experience. I've been part of several groups over the years, and I even count like one of my neighbors where I live here. Like we used to meet once a month, and even though it's a one-on-one thing, I still consider that like a writing group because we were getting together for that purpose to talk over each other's writing, and sometimes we would just like how you mentioned that at times it felt like a little lopsided. There would be times where we would kind of say like, hey, like I'm just going to be upfront, like I'm not going to be able to read because I'm just busy this month, but let's still get together and talk about writing just in general. And sometimes that was really helpful, and also like a way to make us feel like, you know, like we're still writers getting together to talk about writing, but like we don't feel the pressure of like I've got to read stuff or you've got to read stuff and critique, and that can sometimes be helpful, just speaking to your writer soul part, if you're not getting that somewhere else. And like that's sometimes what I feel like writing groups are sometimes really helpful for, is just you know, finding some people who know what it's like to be a writer, because in my travels, like I go to the Writer's Digest annual conference and it's amazing being around all these different writers, and it feels so great. Then I come back home and like I said, like I've got my one neighbor that well, we'll talk about writing, but like everyone else is just like sometimes they don't even read books, which really feels bad. So it's really it's a special thing sometimes just to have like this group, even if you meet once a month, once every 3 months, just to interact with other writers.
Yeah. I love that you say that, Robert, because it reminded me of in the middle of like pre-vaccine COVID, we had an outdoor, me and my writing group were just hungry to see each other, but none of us had really written anything. Shock. It was like the worst time of all of our lives. And we were like, can we just like meet and feel normal, but like just talk about writing? And so we did. And it felt like just like filling our tanks, because we were so depleted in so many ways that even just, meeting people who have the same sort of creative sensitivities as you, to even just talk about it in a broader sense, I do think actually counts.
And I think for me, like listening to you guys talk and thinking about like intention when it comes to writing communities, like the heart of a writing community really should be connection, you know, uplifting people, encouragement. I think the only times I've been a part of, and it's kind of weird, like, is academia a writing community? I think that's like a really interesting question, because you think of the MFA program, which is built around interrogating each other's work, but it seems to, and this is my experience not just with my MFA program, but with my broader academic experience, like when you get a bunch of students in a room looking at each other's work, it can start to feel very competitive. And when you're placed in those environments where it kind of feels like sink or swim, do or die, like I think that those communities can very quickly become toxic.
Totally.
So I think it's really great to hear that, you know, no matter what communities we find ourselves in, we're really finding other writers who really just want to take care of each other and make space for each other. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love that thought, because, you know, we kind of talked about the positives, but that is a real negative. And I've seen it other writing groups that I've even visited, where there'll be like a certain clique of people, and sometimes it's even just one person. It's like the one person that really brings everyone down. But sometimes there's like, a small clique, and I think it's always good to just be wary of,
Yeah.
is this group working for me, and or do I need to kind of break off into a smaller group? When you mentioned academia, I didn't do the master's, but I took a lot of creative writing courses in college, and there would definitely be that, I guess, competitive thing going on, because everyone's trying to get grades and everyone's trying to be like the best in the class, or have like the stories that everyone loves. But I had like my like kind of smaller group of writer friends that, we would get together outside of class, and we had formed our own like kind of smaller writing community. Of course, we're still like workshopping people's stuff inside class, but we would just get together, and we all just kind of had similar sensibilities and goals with our writing, where we could talk about that outside of class.
And I was going to say, this is the academia part of it is really, until I joined Writer's Digest, was the majority of my writing community experience. Right. Was creative writing classes, or in undergrad, or writing workshop type classes for my master's. Yeah. And thinking back on it, I only remember the competition part coming in on really like one occasion, but what I found problematic with those falling into the idea of community was there wasn't necessarily the buy-in by everyone in the class. You have to, I feel like part of, in addition to supporting and thinking about boundaries, I feel like you have to have the buy-in that everyone in this group has a similar goal, or has a similar drive to participate in it. And that wasn't necessarily the case when people were choosing an elective that they thought was going to get them an easy A versus something, versus the others of us who were actually interested in the writing and thinking about it as a, something we wanted to continue doing. And then I got to Writer's Digest and came to the conference for the first time. And Robert, going back to what you said about attending the conference and being around all of those people who, even though their specific writing goals but are very different, everyone there is still so committed to the idea of writing and being supportive of each other and being enthusiastic. And I will say the one thing that, as a staff member going to the conference, that I wish I had more time to talk to more people there instead of thinking about logistics and handing out worksheets or handouts during the sessions, because it's not often that you get to be around that many like-minded people who just want to talk about writing all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I can't wait to be back in person for our conference in a few weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
So we sort of hit on this a little bit in thinking about, we're talking about the idea of buy-in or boundaries or like-minded goals, but what kind of priorities should writers think about when deciding to join a writing community or not? Because I'm just thinking about going back to the idea of competition. I saw this movie on Amazon. I think it was on Amazon Prime, and it may have been called The Writing Group. It didn't get a lot of attention. I think I've mentioned it to you just in passing, to all of you in passing, but it was about a group of writers in California who had these very lofty goals of writing the next great American novel, and then,
Sure.
but they sort of like tear each other apart in their writing group, and they are in just competitive with each other. And then one of them, I think she's played by Kaylee Cuoco. She
Oh, wow.
she makes it big, but she wrote a fantasy novel. It was or some genre fiction that the writing group thought was just, she was letting them all down by writing something that was not literary, and she tried to keep participating in this group, but her priorities were changing, and the group was not fulfilling what she needed anymore. So that's kind of what my thought is about these priorities, is eventually you might kind of outgrow the current writing group that you're in and need to think about moving on.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Amy, because I actually watched that movie after you mentioned it, and it's called Authors Anonymous.
Okay, there it is.
If you want to see, I've seen iterations of this, probably not as dramatic as it is in this movie, because movies always amp everything up.
Sure.
But if you want to see all the possible outcomes of real writing groups, this movie is great. Authors Anonymous, and it really shows, there are people who are there for many different reasons, and I think anytime you come into a writing group, for me, you should really be thoughtful about like what you want at this specific time. Like, do you just want community? Do you want people to look at your writing and give you feedback? Do you feel like you're far enough along where you really need people in your genre to give you specific feedback? Are you ready to really try to get published? Or are you even in the process of getting published and you need other writers who are on that track as well? And you really need that there are so many different small groups of authors who have books coming out at the same time for their debuts, and they use that to leverage with each other to expand their audiences as well. So there are so many different ways to come into it, and I think saying yes to all of that is probably like the wrong way to come into it. It's more that you should really be honest about like, where am I at right now? What do I need? And try to find a group that kind of helps with that stage that you're at.
Yeah, I think if I'm thinking about priorities, I think, and if you're joining a writing group thinking like you will definitely participate, just remember that you're going to workshop and to be workshopped. And in remembering that, just know, if you're there to help someone with their story, know the difference between being constructive and being cruel. And constructive feedback is, when you're surrounded by people you trust, is really helpful. But I think that as we talked about the academia side of it, it can turn cruel really quickly. And just know that what you wouldn't want to hear about your story, don't say that to somebody else. And it seems so basic, but it's really important to remember that. And then on the flip side of that, if you're there to be workshopped, remember what your boundaries are and make sure to tell people what they are. If you're there for a specific reason, and you feel very confident in another aspect of your story, say that. Like, I feel good about this. I really need help on my dialogue. Or this specific scene, I'm having a hard time working through. And then also just being open to learning something from a genre that you don't write in. Like, one of my writing group friends is writing what I think is like truly going to be the best romance novel I'll ever read. And she does dialogue so brilliantly, and I'm really, really insecure about my dialogue. And I have learned just from observing so much about how to write dialogue from reading her stuff. So just, I think, come in with an open mind and remember that you're playing more than one part when you're in a writing group.
I think for me, I always go into a new writing group with like three priorities. So I figured I'd share those and maybe they will help others. So kind of going off what Michael said, boundaries is always my number one thing. Um, I think what I learned in school is that, like, in a workshop, you will read anything that is given to you. But I am an adult human with my own agency, and there are some things that are extremely triggering to me that I will not read. And likewise, like in my group, we have shared things that we're not open to reading. And it's nothing personal. Um, on the flip side of it, I'm a horror author, and some of the stuff that I write is gross. And I have a friend who is like, even the title of this story is triggering to me. And it's not personal. I just say to her, hey, this one you're going to want to take a pass
Yeah.
on. Um, so being able to express those things and be honest with each other and, feel okay with that, number one priority for me. Number two, going off of boundaries, is style of feedback. Especially my MFA program was like particularly traumatizing to me when it comes to the way that my work is perceived in a group setting. Which I know that's my own baggage, right? That I'm bringing into a new community. But it's really important to me that I say, like, hey, this is like not what I'm receptive to. If you could give me the
Yeah.
feedback in this way, I'd really appreciate it. And if the community is okay with that, like, these are my people, I fit here.
Yeah.
And likewise, I have met writers who struggle with receiving feedback that's written down. So they're like, would anybody mind if we do like a 15-minute phone call? And of course, this was an online based writing group. But like, yeah, I'll hop on a Zoom with you so I can give you my feedback verbally if that's more comfortable to you. Um, and then the third thing is diversity. This one is particularly important to me as a queer person who was not a part of a lot of groups that had other queer people. I found myself like editing my stories a lot or not sharing things that I was afraid they might not, like, quote unquote get. So just knowing that, like, there are other people in your group who at least are open to like receiving some things that you've experienced is really important to me.
And listener, if you're hearing a lot of academia talk, if you want to hear more, head to our second episode where Mariah and I talk all about this.
Mariah, I love those, breaking it down into those 3 points. I think you said it better. I mean, I hadn't even thought of it in that particular way, but the idea of how you are, the one about feedback and how you are giving and receiving feedback is, I mean, like, I've identified as a learner, I catch on to things quicker if I can read it, if I can sit there and see it and read it and internalize it. So I don't think, and maybe this is part of why those workshops in college never did much for me, because it was just people talking at me. And I can't internalize that very well. And this is making me think about how I'm not much of a joiner, which might also be part of why I haven't been part of a lot of writing groups, aside from, the ones that I join by default by being in a class or working for Writer's Digest. But so how have you all found, Michael, I know you said yours are friends. How have you found writing groups to participate in?
For me, I've never really had trouble with it. I know I've mentioned it before, but I'm very much an introvert. I usually, with everything in my life, for some reason, people just find me and pull me in. So, some of that, like, in college it was very easy because, we had courses so we could run into each other. And since, like, I've just been very blessed to have gone straight from I was still in college when I started with Writer's Digest, so I've always, I think, just been an easy target for people to pull me in. Not that that's an open invitation to people to pull me in, because time is very limited for me. But yeah, so I guess I'm not too helpful for like how to seek them out. But yeah.
I think for me, it started out as like people that I knew from school, people that I knew growing up with. But then once I became an editor, it was one of those things where like, oh, I work with people who are writers, so you kind of get like, okay, well, we'll start this like little group with us coworkers, and then oh, you know, I have a friend from school, or like my cousin also likes to write, like, and people just like the community just sprouts. But something, when I moved from Pennsylvania to Maryland, I felt like a little bit of an island for a while. I was like doing a whole bunch of like freelancing and not really making like strong connections in my workplaces. So I ended up just being brave, and it was NaNoWriMo, and my local library had a come write in program. So I went to a write in and met some really cool people there, and they were like, hey, are you a part of MWA, Maryland Writers Association? And at that point I was like, I have never even heard of such a thing. And I hadn't realized that most states do have statewide writing associations that are broken down generally by counties. So out here, I'm part of the Anne Arundel County, and so you know, we have people from Baltimore, Annapolis, kind of all over. So I joined that, and then I started going to virtual open mic nights, and in doing that, people were like,
"You are so
hey,
brave."
We do these like online writing groups." And this is where I'm not brave. So I kind of was like, yeah, of course I'll join your like Facebook like friends writing group. And they're like, yeah, we meet once a week. Like, I am part of the group and I'm just a lurker.
Yeah.
I have not participated at all. I haven't commented on anybody's posts. I haven't shown up to the meetings. Like, I know when the meetings are and I put them on my calendar, but I haven't gone yet. And it's just one of those things like, again, this community is waiting for me, and it will continue to wait as long as I don't show up.
Well, I have to say that is helpful, though. I do think if you're not ready to actually show up in person, sometimes being a lurker online is that like gateway drug to eventually getting to the in-person event. And maybe it takes like I've had people on Poetic Asides, you know, doing the poetry challenges every month. I have people that said that they've been doing them for more than 10 years, and then they'll say that like they finally started sharing their poems online. So they're still not even meeting people face to face, but finally participating where they're sharing their poems. So like, I totally wouldn't discount even just being a lurker online. Like that can sometimes be like the first step to getting that community.
And it's also like figuring out the vibe, right? Like when you're lurking, you're like, okay, I'm going to look to see how these people communicate with each other. And like, is that how I want to be communicated with? Is that how I'm okay communicating with them? Like, what are they writing? Do I kind of fit into that bubble? Or like, I mean, some of the stuff that I write, I know is very experimental and bizarre. And a lot of times it just doesn't work. And so I'm like, are they gonna, if I present that to this group, are they just gonna give each other the side eye and sit in silence?
But I do feel like we all are kind of professional lurkers because the nature of our jobs allows us to do that, because we are just given like all of these beautifully written articles from all of these writers who are giving us advice, and I'm just unknowingly sometimes just filing that away and not really, they don't need to know that that's what I'm doing. I'm just editing their piece, but I'm definitely doing that. But as I said, yeah, my writing group just came together after my friend Margie and I have been writing together for years, and it was just a 2-person writing group as well. And then my friend Lily had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have the story that I've been working on, and I wanted your feedback. I know you're a writer." And then she and I met, and it was so good. And then my friend Aaron was like, "Hey, I'm working on this children's book. I don't know if you would be interested in reading it." And then after one of our book club meetings, it was just us. I had sort of engineered it so that it was just us left, and because I was nervous to even admit that I was writing, and I stopped them and I was like, "Hey, like, let's just start a writing group, because each of you are coming to me separately with like really great ideas, and I want us all to experience this." So I also have no advice on how to join one. I think that people who are looking for them, though, probably are in the same boat that all of us are in that we are surrounded by people who are probably interested in this as well. So I think maybe just it might feel brave, but maybe take the first step and ask anyone if they want to join.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even just letting people know that you're interested in writing and reading, and that gets the conversation going.
Yeah, I like what you said about being a professional lurker, Michael, because I think that's what I've been doing for so long, not actively participating in a writing group. I've been reading when I edited the Writer's Digest books, I was internalizing everything that I was editing.
Yeah.
And then same thing with the magazine. I'm just reading all of this great stuff, and I need to take the next step. But I'm not ready for like a workshop type writing group. But maybe just an accountability writing group, a group where where we can just like make sure that we actually are doing the writing every week or every 2 weeks or whatever, because that's where I fall short. Well, I feel like this has kind of been another writing therapy session for me. You all helped me identify, what I should be looking for in a writing community, and how to set my priorities for that. And I hope we did that for everyone else listening as well. So stay tuned, and Michael and Mariah will bring you a couple of fantastic conversations with organizers of some different writing groups.